Hey, what's going on?
How's it going, man? How you doing?
Doing well, doing well. How are you, Dylan?
I'm good. I'm good, man. I'm good. I guess I can give a quick introduction about myself. I'm Dylan. We know each other through Farcaster. I joined about a year and a half ago, and could not be more bullish on the protocol. Like the quick like 1 minute I'd say is started coding when I was a kid, like hacking together WordPress sites, and then learned through YouTube and different online tutorials, web development, databases, model view controller, Swift stuff. And then in high school, started to get really interested in like browsers and dashboards and operating systems and these things that let you control the technology that you were using at the most root layers. And so I just did a bunch of research into it, looking at the semantic web, the history of browsers, history of the operating system. And when COVID hit, started putting that stuff out there because I didn't really know what to do with what I was focusing on. And it was cool to start to meet other people in tech, but then use that as a way to get interested in all of these other things that I felt like were lining up with my interests, such as like crypto, eventually AI, and over the past couple of years, started school at GW 2 years ago. Wasn't really loving what I was doing. Felt like there was a bit of a disconnect between the comp sci I was doing there and the comp sci that was really interesting to me outside of school. Started getting a lot more interested in crypto, but especially Ethereum, and was just learning a lot about it, getting my first ENS, getting some NFTs, doing stuff on chain. And then not this past summer, but the summer before, I interned at Chapter One, an early stage venture capital firm focused on Web3. But beforehand, they were doing a whole bunch of really cool SaaS stuff as well, like Rome Research, Linear, I'm pretty sure Superhuman as well, led by Jeff Morris, who's awesome. And I got to learn a lot about the world of VC and really just like catapulted me into other sorry, I didn't mean to cut off there, but like they're also small investors in Farcaster. So I just wanted to note that for discretion. But really like catapulted myself into the world of Web3 then, meeting people at a whole bunch of firms, meeting people on Farcaster, building some of the early Farcaster apps and seeing like when the first actual Warpcast or, back then Farcaster APIs were put out. This past fall after the Chapter One internship, which was awesome, and I learned so much from, spent a little bit of time doing more browser stuff and built like a spatial canvas tool where you could organize different things you're reading. Like you have different stacks of articles, and as you click the links, they organize them so you're not losing the like trails that you're going down of the different clicks and things you're reading. But then at the end of it, my parents wanted me to go back to school, which was fine, but the way it happened was a little bit contentious and made me feel a little bit down about the browser stuff that I was doing. But the flip side of it was I was able to get back and do a whole bunch of really interesting work. I was on a project that won at ETH Denver called Fund PG with my friend at Gitcoin, which was awesome, where we can retroactively fund projects through the Gitcoin matching pool. And you basically donate percentage of your yield from different routers like Alchemix, and it just goes straight to the pool. I did some really Web 2 stuff, like a version of Reddit that just works off of email with emails and comments, but it has the Reddit style UI. And then this past summer, which I just worked on, I came out here and I worked at a A16 backed startup focusing on a mobile crypto browser. And so that was really awesome to be hands on with a small team in person, and like focused on these verticals that I'm really interested in: crypto, AI, browsers. And so now I'm doing some part-time work with them. I'm in my second to last year of school at now Santa Monica College out in LA. And now I'm also finishing up a couple projects, but really focusing on how I can align everything towards this North Star of a future browser computer, which I think is like I have a lot more conviction for now after going through everything in this past year or so. So that was a little bit long, but that's like the formal intro.
Great, I love it. I love it. So, from what I understand, you've worked a bit at VC. You've gotten a glimpse into the VC world, and you've also worked at a VC-backed company. right? Working on things that interested you anyway, which is mobile crypto browsers. What was that experience like, from, looking out to actually working in a venture-backed startup? Like, what was the experience like from like being the person analyzing the startups, going, okay, this is a good investment, this is a bad investment, this is where we should be looking at for opportunity, to actually building out that startup yourself?
Yeah, for sure. And the interesting point I would add on as well is that I did some part-time work with a firm this summer as well called Double Down, which just launched in the fall. And that was like a really cool opportunity that gave me a lot of perspective as well. So I
They're a
think
VC firm as well, right? Double Down.
yeah, it's a solo female GP, Mags. She's awesome. She's on Farcaster as well. She raised a $30 million fund back in October and November. And it's early because obviously with the fund, it takes a couple years to start deploying. But yeah, they just did like this fellows program this summer where they brought on a couple folks, and that was really cool. But I think
so.
Sorry.
Congrats. And you're chosen. Congrats on that.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it was a cool opportunity. But I think like the main takeaways, other than just learning about the VC space and the fact that this summer was relatively dry, I think one is that sometimes it can be subjective, right? Like you can have certain people at a firm who just they have a certain thesis, and that's kind of their thesis, and that's fine, and that's nothing against them. And I think you could say the same thing about connections. Is people are going to look for deal flow through their connections as a way to validate it, right? Like if you see a company, you get inbound or whatever, and then you want to do your due diligence, you're going to look into research. But one of the key indicators is going to be your mutuals in the venture world, who you're going to reach out to and be like, hey, like, did this company come to you? Did you pass? Are you in the deal? Why? Like, do you know the founders? Do you know the space? And the upside of that is you build your network, and they always say your network is your net worth, but I think it's very true, especially in the VC world. I think the downside though can be when you stick too much to that. Sometimes you
end up pattern matching.
Yeah, you get to a pattern action, and it can almost look like the deals are only based off of the thoughts of other people and not this holistic view of what's going on. And this isn't like talking about anyone in particular. It's just been interesting to observe for sure.
Yeah, I mean that's just the market of VC. It's because and to the credit of VCs, they have a stressful job, and everyone wants to not get fired, right? So it's like, what's the best way to not get fired? It's to take the low-hanging fruit of pattern matching and to have like a safety net, quote unquote, even though it's a bit of a high risk occupation in the sense that you're taking high risk bets, but you're doing your best to reduce some of that risk by looking at what your friends have done, or going into a round that is supported by a bigger fund, because they can do the continuity. There's continuity in their fundraising if the startup ever needed it, for an example.
Totally. Yeah, I think like adding on to the fact of it being a difficult job at some points. I mean, I even met with someone early in the summer who was saying that all year, and I may be like missing the numbers, but that basically all year, out of all of the companies, all the hundreds, thousands companies that may be reaching out or interfacing with, that he's only responsible for 1 or 2 deals in the whole year. And so the amount of diligence that you have to go through in order to really select those 1 or 2 that you're proud to like put up there as yours, it takes a lot. And I think a lot of the folks, at least who I've met, who are really genuine people, are doing it because they want to be that support. Like one of the things, especially with Chapter One, because they've been around for so long, is they have a really great founder experience set up. Like when you're one of their portcos, they will jump on calls and help you strategize through things. They have a great network of connections for the different resources that you may need to help grow your company. And I think that was one of the key takeaways that I saw. Also, I worked very closely with the head of founder experience, essentially, who is awesome. Shout out to Maria. And I think I just got to see really hands-on how much effort goes into that, but how much of a value add it is, not just for like building up the name of your brand the same way that like other firms would do that through content, but just through that it shows like that they care to me. And to me, like that made me want to be a part of that the value add to them was why they were doing the job. And I think similarly, when you're in a startup, that's the vibe that you want to get when you're with a founder and they're doing it because like they love what they're doing. They really believe in that mission. They're gonna go to bat for you.
Yeah. And so chapter one, they're very much like a founder supportive VC is what you're saying.
Yeah, totally. I think that was one of the biggest things that I observed was how much goes into the post-investment side of things.
What's the experience like for a founder? Let's say they go through a VC like a chapter one that's founder friendly, quote unquote, that a lot of VCs kind of market themselves as. When you say they go to bat for you, what does that look like?
Sure. So I guess like what I mean is, and again, like I have only experienced so many firms. I've only been at 2 of them, but I think there can be many sides of it. There can be sides of being an investor where you kind of just put the check in and you're looking for the monthly updates, or you're just not as involved. And this isn't even just for venture investing. It can be for private equity, like any sort of investing. But I think especially with venture and with early stage venture, like pre-seed to A, especially, there is a side of it, which is we're going to be a check, but we're going to be there to support you. We're not just going to be a name that you put on Twitter to be like, hey, like we got an investment from so-and-so, even though that helps, like that all that marketing totally helps. But I could see that there was support in terms of resources they had that they were willing to help out with, and the small steps that they took to ensure they were responding to messages quickly. They had the right resources available. I don't really think that it is rocket science, but I think putting effort can at times be a lot more than others are doing, especially
I know a lot of VCs help with like business development, for example.
Yeah.
Right? So like what kind of business development do they help with exactly? Like, do they set up your emails? Do they just help you getting appointments, set up your VA, things like that?
I think it depends on the scale that different people are at. I think for some firms that are taking pre-seed and seed deals, especially if they're like leading or they're really big in the round, at times it can even be really hands-on. It can be those porcos going to the office and like working through business strategy, working there, getting leads for new roles. It like I think the more mature the startup gets, the bigger in scope it becomes in terms of it's not like the setting up your email kind of thing. But I think at the beginning, some of those early investors can like make the core identity of a firm almost. And then also doing things like setting up with a design agency and legal and like just all those different things where you would trust it more through that vetted firm than like your friend or through Google.
Gotcha. So they really do like roll up their sleeves and help you get set up and established, and even with strategy and things of that nature.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, that's cool. Yeah, those are some of the key benefits I want to take away for the listeners and people watching this that are founders looking from the outside into VC. What's the true advantage besides just money? There can be quite a bit here. Now, Dylan, I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you're building as well, because you're unique in the sense that not only have you worked in VC, you've worked also in VC-backed startups, and now you have your own startup. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you're building and how you plan to grow it, and where you see the direction of your startup moving with the growth of the decentralized social protocol that is Farcaster.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, who knows if and when it becomes a startup or what it is. Like, that is my goal. But right now, like, it's just me shipping code, honestly. So there's a couple things. I think the first of it is I'm finishing up a second version of Caster Scan right now, which I've been getting to for a long time. It was supposed to be out early last week. I guess the alpha is It's going to be out tomorrow.
What is it?
Sorry?
What is it?
Yeah, so okay, so CasterScan is a block explorer for Farcaster. Normally, you think about block explorers on blockchains that have transactions going through them with actual money, and so that is what you're tracking. But the whole side of it that isn't just money is the raw data of events that are happening on a blockchain, or in this case on this protocol, which is just the design is very similar to a blockchain in terms of the way that they've thought everything through and the way that they have a whole system of hubs, which are supposed to be like Ethereum nodes. And so a lot of developers in the Ethereum ecosystem, but I guess the analog and the Farcaster ecosystem, they'll have to write custom code or go through all of these different steps just to get really basic data. And when the data is open and permissionless, not only should it be available, but it should be somewhat easy to access. And so I think the idea is put out data similar to the way that Etherscan kind of makes like these permalinks to data that makes it like a public database, but also going a bit of a step further, thinking about an interface that's going to make it a little bit more visually appealing and easy to use for people, and hopefully become, at least for developers at first, become part of their workflow. And in the future, there are a couple add-ons that I think could make it ecosystem good, just like something that goes beyond the idea of a block explorer and focuses on the idea of what if this is this publicly available registry of the Farcaster data, and you can view permalinks and you can analyze it in a way that is somewhat intuitive.
Awesome. And how do you, like, right now you're just shipping code, but how do you see yourself monetizing this?
So right now for CasterScan, I'm just viewing it as a public good. I've won retroactive funding from Purple and Purpler, which has gone towards basically, the time of working on it, plus hosting for the database and the hub, which I'm running through Nanar, which they're awesome. And the dashboards piece of it, which I'm adding on next, which is like where you get more analytics, is basically imagine no code Dune dashboards for Farcaster data.
Yeah.
I think that is the part that can become really interesting. And I've even had people, when I pitch the idea to them, say, oh, if you add, like a card.co or bento.me, where you like move items around kind of no code way. They said, oh, if you can add that sort of feature onto it where you can drag and drop like you do in Dune, then people could even use it to like make clients that they've been wanting to make and can't make because they don't know how to code and like don't want to go through the hassle. I think that would become part of it in terms of a business model, even though it would be great for it to be this public good that can have its own set of public goods funding and like stay up as an ecosystem good.
What kind of client do you see being built on it if it was no code drag and drop model?
That's a good question. So I think where it has a connection with Cortex, which is where it also kind of answers that question, is in the future, what I see this being is like the way it's built right now is the data for CasterScan is built within a Cortex module, and the Farcaster data is a data source inside of Cortex, so that I can build out different data sources. So like there's going to be an LLM data source that I'm working on, a notes data source, a calendar data source. Imagine it being like the iCloud, but for all of your different web apps and stored in a more secure, decentralized manner. I think where it could go is this idea of the no code drag and drop for CasterScan is like an interface that I want to build out at a larger scale for all of this iCloud for web app data. And so I think as those controls get more complex, then the apps you can build per domain get more complex as well. And I think that's where the size of the apps could really scale. So you could see someone building an app like an OpenCast, for example, fully without code in this kind of like interface builder, as if it's a web flow more connected to these data sources.
And would you say your upper limit on growth would be the upper limit on the total users on the Farcaster protocol itself, or are you independent of that? I
think for CasterScan individually, it's very Farcaster focused. And so
Yeah.
some of the metrics are just going to have to be based on the protocol DAUs, because I think Dan said this recently in the Jam Twitter space that growing those DAUs is going to be the most important for people building businesses, because the more that those DAUs grow, the more there are meaningful pockets within the DAUs that can actually become larger, like venture scaled businesses.
Yeah.
That separately, the goal for me isn't to just build on the Farcaster ecosystem. I think the goal is that Farcaster is this one data source that I'm just using as this small little example for this community, but to really build it out into all these other things. And for example, there's another app built on this Cortex stack that I'm working on as well. And as I build these more out, I'm going to then focus on, okay, well, the data and the UI is connected between them, but what makes these all one app or one experience or one piece of software that you're booting per se?
Which other data sources are you looking at?
So, for example, that other app building is like an activity log of all of the different things that I'm doing throughout my day connected to these web apps, except it's sorted with an LLM. And at the bottom, it just has an input where I just type in things and it'll automatically sort it based on entities that I'm typing in the text and objects from the activity graph. So let's say that it's picking up from my Twitter DMs or my Google Calendar that we were in this meeting, and then I'm typing something about like related to the meeting. It'll kind of like semantically connect the two.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting.
Thank you. You can have like
spikes me at the end here.
Yeah. So no, that one I think is like going to be interesting. Also because I feel like I'm going to get a lot of benefit from it personally. Like I kind of stink at personal management just because there's like a lot going on, and I'm not the best at setting a list of what I need to do for the next day. But I think the idea is that with apps like that, it gives a more consumer and non-niche like Farcaster way for me to introduce what I'm working on. And then as I build that out, the connection between the niche and the more generalized work comes in. As the generalized work gets larger, there become plugins for the niche as well. Like you type in that thing and Farcaster can be a data source that gets auto parsed, or in an activity, it auto summarizes like you spend an hour and a half on Warpcast and casted about X, Y, and Z topics.
You know, the interesting application of this is if you somehow I know Reddit is expensive now, but if there's like a way to like parse through Reddit's subreddits,
I think there is. There's like I'll send you the links later, but there's stuff.
Okay, there's ways around the API.
Yeah, it's always some wrappers.
Yeah, because those subreddits are really valuable. There's a million member subreddits that I personally feel that if you have a subreddit with at least 1 million members in your community, that's, to me, is a venture backable subreddit, like to service that community, you know?
Yeah, I think like that's where I really like what they've done with channels. Mm-hmm. To an extent. I think it's like right now the UI is becoming a little bit too much, although I know they're actively working on it, like trying to add all these different features. I think that is where someone could make, you know, the sports client, etc., and that like has all these different sports integrations, or Strava for running, or whatever kind of like little niche you want to think about. One thing I've tried to think about is how you can expand other FIP2 content. So like I did this site, FC Rewind, and it uses the character scan data, and just you may have to go back a week or two when you click on it, but it just shows you the most like popular links.
Nice.
7 days.
Yeah.
And the idea was like, can this become the trending page of Farcaster for things you missed? Like you missed this conversation. But one idea I had is so with FIP2, like that's what makes channels work, but also FIP2, like behind the scenes, you can respond directly to URLs for websites without them designating it as a channel. And then when it shows up in Warpcast, it says like replying to content, and like the UI for it isn't as nice. But if you build it out, then Farcaster is also like this social commenting system on top of the internet. And separately, let's say that we were to be commenting on similar stuff, but like let's say there's like I don't know. Let's say like some new LLM drops and you do an FIP2 comment on a Twitter post about it, I do a comment on a PDF about it, but we're commenting about the same thing. On Twitter, they would get picked up in like a trending tag, but Farcaster doesn't really have that. So what if you could do the FIP2 posts, and what if they had that sort of trending content? I know they're probably not going to add that into Warpcast, but I feel like that is like, could be a huge unlock for building out content that then the algorithm will better surface for you.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, they might integrate into the algorithm if you can prove that it's valuable to the engineers. It's basically a wayback machine for Farcaster with a trending algorithm component.
Well, the only thing is it's not valuable without the actual data of posting to the website. And so you would either need it in the Warpcast app, or you need to build like an iCloud shortcut and hope that everyone uses that.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
Yeah.
I mean, as Dan builds out Warpcaster, maybe he'll integrate like plugins, like easy plugins for people like
that
you.
would be my goal. I feel like that would be awesome, especially if you could take different on-chain actions or like read Web3 articles directly within a cast. I think that would be, I know that Discove is working on something similar.
Yeah, Discove has something cool like that. Basically,
Yeah.
they summarize the week's events or like past events. Like if they had a Discove kind of mixed in with what you're building with like FC Rewind, like integration as a plugin into the Warpcaster app, that would be an interesting app. Like I would definitely download that.
Yeah, totally. Like, one of the things I was thinking of doing over a weekend when I had time, just to put ideas out there, is like do my own, like in Figma, just do my own redesign of Warpcast with all the features that I would want in it, like FIP2 posting, multi-account support, scheduling casts, plugins, and just throw it out there and see like, will anyone from Warpcast or any other client build out even one of these features?
Yeah, that's true. That'd be cool. Well, Dylan, on that note, let's end the recording for now. We can talk after.
Yeah.
I really want to thank you for your time. And we got a great insights into your background, working in VC, working in a VC-backed startup, and then forming your own projects, as well as the decentralized social protocol of Farcaster and how you're building on top of it as well. So really appreciate your time, Dylan.
Of course. It's great to chat, Kazi.